Welcome to the Bold Life School, the show that empowers you to elevate your life and to step into your full potential. I'm your host, Jameson, and this is where ambition meets authenticity, where you'll find the tools and inspiration to grow, evolve, and thrive. Each week, we dive into powerful topics that challenge the status quo, whether it's to break through limiting beliefs, navigate life's transitions, or embrace the bold moves that push you beyond your comfort zone. Now let's get into today's episode. What if I told you you're fighting the wrong villain? Every story you've ever loved taught you the same basic set of lessons. Defeat the villain, conquer the obstacle, survive the storm, change the system, win the approval, get the prince, get the promotion, overcome the thing, the person, the circumstance standing in your way. And then that's when you win and you finally get peace and happily ever after. Well, that's the emotional architecture of storytelling. And honestly, it makes for good movies. That's probably why they make them over and over again. But I think it creates terrible emotional strategy in real life when we try to solve our problems the same way. Because most people are unknowingly trying to emotionally manage their lives by controlling things outside of themselves. Your boss, your relationship, your kids, the timeline for the next step, the uncertainty that you have, your outcomes, the system around you, another person's emotions, another person's approval, and everyone else's behavior. We should a lot of things. They should a lot of things. And actually, the one place we actually hold the most leverage goes untouched. Our own thoughts, our emotional patterns, our nervous system, our boundaries, our identity, and how we want to be seen in our lives, our reactions, and our self-leadership. And this is where coaching becomes radically different from the way most people approach fixing their lives. Because coaching redirects the focus away from controlling the circumstances and back toward leading yourself through the circumstances. That distinction changes everything. In causal coaching, we look at how your thoughts create your feelings influence your actions, and your actions then create the results. And this means the circumstance itself is not often the primary source of suffering. Sure, circumstances, people, places, things can be very annoying, but that's not what causes our reactions. It's our interpretation of the circumstance that is the primary source of suffering. Now, to be clear, this doesn't mean that circumstances don't matter. There are circumstances that are more complex than others, and that certainly tends to make things more challenging for us. Pain matters, loss matters, trauma matters, the systems we live in matter, and toxic environments matter. But most people are still exhausting themselves trying to solve emotional pain externally. And that's where they get trapped. So today, I want to walk through the 4 classic story conflicts: man versus society, man versus man, man versus self, and man versus nature. As an English major in college and a lifelong book lover, I thought it would be fun to use iconic women-centered stories to show how these struggles actually show up psychologically in real life. Because the truth is, most women are not just fighting circumstances. They're fighting emotional battles underneath the circumstances. And the real breakthrough happens the moment you stop fighting the wrong villain. Before we get into the movies, I want to introduce one of the most important concepts in this episode. And honestly, This may become one of the most important concepts in your life if you really understand it. A lot of burnout behaviors are actually control behaviors. We try to control everything: perfectionism, people pleasing, overworking, overachieving, overthinking, overexplaining, hyperindependence, and hypervigilance are just a few. Many women think these behaviors are personality traits, but sometimes they're actually protection strategies, defense mechanisms. The woman triple checking every email before sending is not always just detail oriented. Sometimes she's terrified of criticism. The woman who can't relax on vacation is not always ambitious. Sometimes she's just built her entire identity around productivity, or she's been running so hard she does not know how to stop and smell the roses. The woman who keeps trying to explain herself in circles during conflict is not always communicative. Sometimes she just believes that giving more clarity can control rejection of her ideas. A few years back, this was me. I would present a piece of information and then I would clarify what I meant in case they didn't get it the first time and clarify that too. So now they had options, right? No, they did not need those options. There's the woman who overfunctions for everyone around her. Well, she's not always generous. Sometimes she's trying to control abandonment or just be liked by people. Too much, maybe. And this is why so many high achieving women feel exhausted. Their nervous system's constantly trying to monitor and control variables that were never fully controllable to begin with, to make sure we have approval, to get the right outcomes, to control the perception of others around us. When we're looking for safety and we want validation. And finally, when we want certainty, when we are able to control our outcomes, that's when many of us feel the safest. This is what I call emotional outsourcing. Emotional outsourcing is when your emotional stability becomes dependent on external conditions. Well, I can't feel okay until they approve of me. I can't relax until I know how my boss responds. I can't move until I have absolute certainty. I can't trust myself until I know that everyone agrees. I can't feel safe until the circumstance that's difficult changes. That creates chronic emotional exhaustion. It's tiring because eventually your entire nervous system becomes organized around trying to manage uncontrollable things. And once you see that pattern, you start approaching your life very differently. So let's talk about how these dynamics appear in the stories we love. So first, we'll start with Man versus Society, Elle Woods. Honestly, the movie Legally Blonde was so cute, so funny, so heartwarming, and it had a great message. It was psychologically brilliant. At the beginning of the story, Elle Woods gets rejected because she's perceived as too feminine, too soft, too unserious for Harvard, too pink, and just all around too much. And so she creates a strategy. And that strategy is, oh, I will prove myself. I'll become impressive enough, serious enough, respectable enough, worthy enough. And she decides that if she can conquer the system, then she'll finally feel validated. And women do this constantly in real life, especially ambitious women. We center our lives on the success that we're able to achieve. And this is the woman who lowers the tone of her voice in meetings to sound more authoritative. The woman who strips personality out of herself at work because she wants to appear credible. Sometimes I walk around the office and wonder, man, why is everyone so serious around here? Am I the only one that is different? The woman who believes professionalism requires emotional flatness. We are definitely told that, women are too emotional. And as a result, we try to mute that part of ourselves, especially in professional places. And there's the woman who thinks success requires hardness, almost taking on masculine traits, becoming a shark in a shark tank so that you are not eaten by a whale. The woman who suppresses warmth, playfulness, creativity, femininity, sensuality, humor, or softness because she thinks visibility and vulnerability is dangerous. Some women achieve external success by emotionally cutting off parts of themselves along the way. That's a tragedy. But honestly, I understand it deeply. I've also absolutely gone through periods in my career where I believed if I become smart enough, prepared enough, strategic enough, professional enough, flawless enough, serious enough, then eventually I'll feel secure. I'll feel like I belong here. But the emotional goalpost keeps moving when your worth is tied to performance, to who sees and rewards your success. That is the trap. Now, here's what's fascinating about Elle Woods' transformation. She does not actually win in the end by becoming less herself. She wins when she stops abandoning herself. She stops apologizing for her personality. She stops treating her femininity like it's a weakness. She stops trying to perform all of this seriousness and just comes forth with her authentic self. And suddenly, the exact things she thought made her less credible become assets. Her intuition, her emotional intelligence, social awareness, confidence, ability to connect with people, and just being her authentic self. That was the real breakthrough. She stopped trying to become acceptable to the system, the society in which she lived and worked, and started becoming fully herself inside the system. And this is where coaching changes everything. Because coaching asks, what if your exhaustion is not coming from ambition itself, but from the constant effort of performing in this identity that just doesn't fit and doesn't fit you? That changes people's lives because many women are not burned out from working hard. They're burned out from performing competence, likability, performing professionalism, perfection, emotional suppression. When you become so focused on being respected and how you're perceived, in some ways you become unrecognizable to yourself. And that's not leadership. That's identity erosion. And sometimes the breakthrough is not defeating the system. It's refusing to disappear inside it. And if man versus society is about trying to win approval from the system, then man versus man is about trying to win emotional safety from another person. And this one traps women for years. I thought the story, The Devil Wears Prada, was timely because the second one came out this week. I did not get to see it because, of course, I had to go see Super Mario Galaxy with my son instead. But I will see The Devil Wears Prada 2 when it comes out on Netflix or on the TV. So man versus man is the conflict. In The Devil Wears Prada, Andy enters this world of Miranda Priestley, believing the goal is obvious. Survive Miranda, impress Miranda, and earn Miranda's approval. And slowly, almost invisibly, Andy starts to reorganize her entire identity around managing one powerful person's perception of her. And this is where the movie becomes psychologically brilliant because Miranda is not actually the real antagonist in the story. She's not the villain. Andy's emotional dependence on Miranda's approval is. That's the real conflict. Andy buys into the myth. If I can finally get this person to validate me, then I'll finally feel secure. And she goes to the ends of the earth to make this woman happy. And women do this everywhere with bosses, parents, partners, emotionally unavailable people that they want to magically turn into emotionally available people, prestigious institutions. Women spend years trying to emotionally graduate from people who were never designed to approve of them. The results are brutal. We become hypervigilant. We're burnout. We shapeshift. We overfunction. We've got stress and anxiety. And we end up with identity erosion. We don't even know who the hell we are, or like Andy, start to lose the relationships around us that are most valuable when others who love you don't recognize you. This is the employee who spends Sunday night sick with anxiety trying to predict her boss's Monday morning mood. The woman who refreshes Slack constantly waiting for feedback after she's sent out a draft of something. The woman whose nervous system shifts because someone important sounds colder than usual in an email. The woman who overexplains herself during conflict because she's trying to prevent rejection or is hoping that her idea will be good enough. The woman who keeps chasing approval from emotionally withholding people because unconsciously she believes love and validation have to be earned through performance. Over time, you stop asking, what do I want? And what do I think? And you start asking, how do I avoid disappointing them? You lose yourself. It's emotional captivity. And honestly, I know this dynamic personally too. I've absolutely had moments where my emotional state became too dependent on external approval, where I believed if I could just become indispensable enough, valuable enough, seen enough, prepared, perfect enough, then I would finally feel secure. I would get the promotion. I would have the success and validation that I wanted. But the goalpost always keeps moving, especially when your self-worth is outsourced externally. That's a trap. And the breakthrough in this movie, The Devil Wears Prada, is not winning Miranda. The breakthrough was realizing that Miranda becoming emotionally safe was never the solution. Andy becomes free the moment she decides that she no longer wants her identity organized around earning approval from someone incapable of giving her stable emotional safety. And that is a radically different orientation to life. And coaching accelerates this shift dramatically because coaching redirects the focus away from managing or controlling another person's emotional state and back towards managing your own. So instead of asking, how do I get them to change? How do I get them to like me? Coaching will help you ask, what interpretation is creating my suffering? What am I thinking about this that's making me feel so bad? What emotional pattern am I living over and over? What am I making this situation mean about me? If someone disagrees with your direction on a project, that's okay. There's room for negotiation there. There's room to communicate about it. But what are you making it mean about yourself and your skill set and your acceptability? That is what creates the struggle, the strife, the concern, the worry. Asking yourself, am I handing away my own emotional authority in trying to please someone else? Trying to control another person's perception of you is one of the fastest ways to lose yourself. And some women spend decades trying to win these battles that were never really actually winnable. Sometimes the villain is not society, and it's not another person. Sometimes the villain lives entirely inside your own head. And honestly, I think this is where many high-achieving women secretly suffer the most. I chose a darker story for this, Black Swan, for man versus self. Black Swan is one of the best portrayals of destructive perfectionism I've seen. The character Nina believes perfection is the answer. Get more discipline, more control, more precision, more self-correction. And underneath all of it is the same hidden belief. If I become perfect enough, then I'll feel safe. I'll feel good. I'll be ready. I'll be successful. And that's the kind of belief that destroys people, because perfectionism is rarely about excellence. It's usually about emotional survival and some witchy woo that we're doing inside our own heads. Perfectionism is often self-rejection, just dressed up as discipline. And so many ambitious women secretly live here psychologically. This is the woman who can't celebrate accomplishments because she immediately focuses on what is next. The woman who feels guilty resting, feels like it's too unproductive to just lie around and watch a movie. The woman who turns rest into optimization. How can I multitask and watch this movie? Or what else can I get done alongside watching the movie? The woman who can't enjoy success because she's terrified of losing it. The woman who mistakes anxiety for motivation. The woman who secretly believes exhaustion proves that she's committed. Some women become addicted to pressure because pressure is the only state in which they feel valuable. And they start to live in pressure so that when it's gone, it's confusing. That's a brutal way to live. Eventually, the nervous system collapses under that pressure of constant self-surveillance and constant pushing the self forward and forward. And that's what happens in Black Swan. The tragedy isn't because ballet. The tragedy is that Nina believes mastery requires self-destruction. Many women quietly believe that too, that suffering is the price of greatness, that anxiety means they care enough, that relentless self-criticism is what keeps them successful. But causal coaching completely reframes this. We ask, what thought is creating this emotional experience? Not how do I perform harder to get external validation? And that distinction matters enormously because the circumstance is not always the suffering. It's your relationship to the circumstance often that is, your thoughts about the circumstances, your beliefs about it. And here's what's important. Most of these control strategies begin as protection strategies. Perfectionism may have protected you from criticism, sure. People-pleasing may have protected you from rejection. Overachievement may have protected you from feeling inadequate or catching up to the others. Hypervigilance may have protected you from unpredictability, right? If you're hypervigilant, then you're not going to have any surprises. That's why these patterns feel so hard to release. They were survival adaptations first, but eventually, survival strategies become prison cells for ourselves. And some women are not actually driven by ambition. They're driven by the terror of not being enough. That is completely different emotionally. And until that internal relationship with yourself changes, no external achievement will ever feel like a rival achievement success. And eventually, life does humble all of us. We can't control everything. It humbles us with a category of conflict that we can't dominate at all. And that is a man versus nature conflict. Because nature is going to be nature. The place where life throws random things at us, it reminds us that control is usually, at least partially, an illusion. So this type of man versus nature conflict we're going to talk about with the movie Wild. And this was a Reese Witherspoon movie where her character, Cheryl, begins the story trying to outrun her pain. She had grief, loss, a lot of chaos in her life, and was engaging in self-destruction. So what does she do? She takes on the Pacific Crest Trail. She goes on this, life-changing hiking trip solo. And initially, the trail looks like the antagonist, right? The thing that she has to go up against and beat. The weather, the terrain, the isolation, the physical suffering. But the trail's not the real conflict. The real conflict is Cheryl's relationship with herself inside uncontrollable circumstances. Because nature doesn't negotiate, but neither does life sometimes. Life doesn't wait until you feel emotionally prepared. It doesn't guarantee certainty. It doesn't guarantee fairness. We all know that. And eventually, Cheryl's forced into something deeper than control. Acceptance, grief, presence in her own life. She finds resilience and learns self-trust, not control. It's almost through these situations that she couldn't control where she had to encounter her own mind and her own feelings, and through that was able to overcome some of her internal issues. And honestly, I think this is one of the hardest emotional lessons that adults ever learn. Some women spend years trying to emotionally negotiate with reality. Like, we'll negotiate with aging. We don't want to do it. With endings. We don't want to leave relationships. We want to stay comfortable. Negotiating with grief. Having a hard time accepting the loss of a partner, a family member, a pet. And negotiating with uncertainty, which is why we want to control everything, because who likes not knowing what's coming next or whether you're secure or feeling secure in your own life. We say things like, once I get over this, I'll feel okay. Once life stabilizes, I'll relax. Once I know what's happening, then I'll feel good again. But life keeps moving. And one of the most painful adult realizations is understanding that peace cannot always wait for resolution. If you're living in the circumstances of chaos around you that you can never control, and you believe that you can never be peaceful until that's over, then peace is never going to come. Some circumstances can't be conquered. They can only be carried differently. And that's not weakness, that is emotional adulthood. Because self-leadership doesn't always mean controlling the outcomes or that you're always going to get the right outcome. Sometimes it just means setting boundaries, taking action, feeling your feelings, feeling grief when things don't work out, tolerating uncertainty, and doing the work, having the good attitude anyway, surrendering control, accepting reality, and trusting yourself anyway. That's maturity. And coaching isn't about pretending painful circumstances do not matter. It's about redirecting attention towards the place where leverage still exists, and that's in your thoughts, in your responses, in your nervous system, in your identity and your choices and your boundaries and your ability to lead yourself through difficulty. That's where the power lies. Not because you control life, but because you still control how you relate to life. And that distinction changes everything. So let me leave you with a few questions. Where in your life are you still fighting the wrong villain? Where are you trying to control circumstances, people outside of yourself? Whose approval are you still chasing? Where are you performing instead of just living authentically? And where have you tied emotional safety to external factors, to achievement, validation, certainty, or another person's behavior? What circumstances are you demanding change before you allow yourself to be peaceful? Why not find peace right now? And where would your life begin to change if you redirected that energy, the one of blame on external factors, inward instead? And ask yourself, how can I change my thoughts? What are my feelings telling me about what I want to do and how I can find peace in this situation? Because your life doesn't need more control. Maybe it needs more self-trust. Maybe it needs more inquiry. Maybe the answer is not becoming better at managing everyone else's expectations and behaviors. Maybe the answer is becoming more honest about your own. Maybe freedom begins the moment you stop outsourcing your emotional state to things outside of your control and start taking care of yourself and putting yourself first. The problem's not always the circumstance. The problem's believing your emotional freedom depends on controlling factors that are, quite frankly, outside of your control. And that belief, if you don't change it, it keeps people trapped for years, trying to control the boss, the relationship, the system, the timeline, the outcome, the uncertainty, or life itself. And when we do that, we can't be happy. We can't be content. We can't feel successful because very seldom are we able to control those outside factors. Meanwhile, the actual power sits untouched. That's our ability to think differently, respond differently, grieve differently, move differently, feel our feelings, and accept them, accept us, lead ourselves differently, and choose differently. Movies teach us the hero changes the world, but real life often works very differently. Sometimes the real hero's journey is learning how to stop outsourcing your emotional state to circumstances you can't control, and instead becoming someone capable of leading yourself through uncertainty, through rejection, through discomfort, through grief, misalignment, growth, without abandoning yourself in the process. That's the real plot twist. And honestly, that's where your personal freedom begins. If this episode hits you hard, if you realize you've been trying to emotionally manage your life by controlling circumstances that are outside your control, I want you to take my free 2-minute Career Burnout Signals Quiz to identify whether you're dealing with burnout, boundary overload, plateau, misalignment, or maybe you're just outgrowing your current circumstance completely. Because once you correctly identify the real conflict, you can stop wasting energy trying to solve the wrong problem, control other people. And if the quiz reveals you're standing at a real turning point in your career or in your life, I'll walk you through the next steps inside my 7-day challenge that comes up there. You can find the link to both in the show notes. Well, I hope this episode was one part insightful and one part inspiring you to maybe go out there and watch one of these really good movies. And I will see you next week. If you enjoyed today's episode, head over to theboldlife.coach for more resources, join our community, and start living your boldest life today.